Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 29th of June, 2026, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have Ben Rubin with me in the studio.
Delighted to be here, Brian.
Looking as though you got some sunshine over the weekend, I think.
I did, yes. It was dangerously hot outside, actually. I was terrified by the heat. So I did take proper precautions, though, but I did catch a little bit of sun. You are correct.
You survived. That's good.
Yes.
I did speak to one or two elderly people over the weekend who were finding it a bit tough, but they were staying indoors out of the sun, and they were still very pleased to see the blue sky and sunshine. So that's our take on it, which is probably very different from the BBC. We've got a lot to cover. We're going to have a look at the rise of the Antichrist. We're going to be looking at restrictions on free speech. We're going to be looking certainly at the drive back to the EU, migration as a tool of destabilisation, and we've got a little bit of a focus on Wales for that. LCAW, yes, you'll have to wait for the segment to find out what that's really about and who benefits. But overall, really, the theme is how great Andy Burnham is. So let's kick off with the gentleman in question, and what better way than to put his face on screen, or maybe not. Now, what is the caption? Well, there can only really be one caption, and if there's any question about God, that's Andy Burnham, apparently, Ben. And I think
he's just great, isn't he?
It's just astonishing to see this man now fated across the press and the media. He can do no wrong. He's the saviour. It's pretty disgusting. But let's have a look at some of the headlines and to why we've homed in on this particular man. So Financial Times here, this was really a key one for me. Burnham plots number 10 of the North in push for radical devolution of power. Now, this is really what it's all about, because, of course, he's been building his empire there in the north of UK. But at the end of the day, this is about devolving power. Now, local people are told it's going to give them more power, but the real agenda is to bring the power of the state down to the lowest possible level. We've got a little bit more here, so let's bring in these articles. We've got the Daily Telegraph, which says that Burnham must call an election. We've got the Times telling us that more cash is set to go north. And I think a lot of that is going to be to help to sway voters that Burnham is even better than they may think he is. We've got Weekend with the Burnham bounce, Labour leapfrogs reform with new leader. Burnham, but it goes on. Burnham, let's bring in a bit more. Daily Mail, migration crackdown is softened for Burnham. Now we're getting into some of the agenda that's going to cause problem, but also going to be used as a weapon against the wider population. And The Guardian there with the headline, pressure on Mahmood over immigration bill. It goes on, stay with me. And what have we got here? Failing water firms face state control under Burnham plans for power. That's, of course, political power as opposed to water and electricity at the moment. The Daily Telegraph, this was from a couple of days ago, but I felt I had to grab it. Temperature on the particular day in question was very high. Burnham calls on Miliband as Chancellor. And, of course, the joke for the Daily Mail was King Charles having his hair blown dry. Sorry, he was having a fan to cool him off. But the Telegraph thought that was the opportunity to make light of Burnham's intended politics. Do you think he's really called on Miliband as Chancellor, Ben?
Has he called on Miliband as Chancellor? I don't know. I mean, Miliband's basically doing the job that he always wanted to do in the Net Zero, Department for Net Zero at the moment. But if you put him in as Chancellor, then, well, I suppose...
Powerful man.
Extraordinarily, very dangerous man, Miliband, I believe. And actually, if you look at the kind of economic model that they're pushing forward to, this idea of Manchesterism, which will come back in a moment, total centralised control of the economic system by the state is what they're after. And that is certainly right up Miliband Street, I would say.
As both the brothers came from a Marxist father and a Marxist background,
Indeed.
So that would fit. Well, I couldn't resist this one. From a video, you'll find the details of that in the show notes. But here's Burnham to make a major speech on economy and devolution. Now, that's actually happened. Ben, you listened in, it was pretty weak, but let's just add something over the top of this, because it seems that what's coming in with Burnham is do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Whatever this man decides to focus on and do, that's going to be brought into effect in the country. So immensely powerful individual, no doubt selected and coming forth to be Prime Minister. And what can we expect to see as this happens? Well, we are going to see more of the same Yahoo politics. The headline from the Metro here trying to indicate that the Conservatives under Kemi Badenoch is going to take him to task. But the UK column is saying to our audience, just get ready for more Yahoo politics and political theatre as the uniparty policies and agenda continues. So the moment Andy Burnham, tremendously powerful, clearly selected for major constitutional and devolution change in the UK, and it's not going to be taking us into a better place, Ben.
No, I shouldn't say so. He's been crowned. It's a coronation.
Yes,
this is it's been handed to us as the de facto outcome of Starmer's resignation, is that we now have Andy Burnham. He's going to be the Prime Minister. There's some kind of process that they're going to have to go through, but actually it's just going to be him. And the real question is he really great or really, really, really great? Do you think he's really, really, really great?
I don't think he's really, really great, but he is really, really dangerous.
Yeah, I think
this man is going to be taking this country to pieces. He's going to be destroying it completely.
Yeah, that's certainly the job. He's going to be, according to his speech that he was delivering as we were putting the news together, doing things differently. And we couldn't cover this because it was still really just he was in the opening remarks when we needed to shut things down, basically. But I'll tell you what, it was very, very heavily stage managed. Canned laughter. Well, I'm sure it was real laughter from the people in the audience, but they'd certainly been told that they had to laugh at the jokes because they were not good jokes. And actually, I found the whole delivery of the thing very perfunctory and not very impressive. I think he's going to have to up his game if he's going to be an international leader, I would say. But he's talking about doing things differently. What does that mean? We've heard this term, Manchesterism, a lot. And my question is, which I'm going to keep on trying to answer, what does that mean? What does Manchesterism actually mean? We're going to dig into a bit of it now. It's quite a big agenda, actually. The total transformation of our political and economic systems. We showed this image last week, which is the transformation of the skyline in Manchester between 2010 and 2025. And this is presented as, in large part, Manchesterism. And he talks about the transformation of the skyline as being one of his key achievements.
Success, yeah.
Exactly. So this means property development, the destruction of the existing infrastructure of the city. And we got a short clip here of Burnham talking to the Centre for Cities about Manchesterism about 3 months ago, before this whole new...
I've talked about public control a lot. I need to add to the list of things that you need more public control over or be more intentional about is your investment strategy. I didn't it didn't start with me. So Howard Bernstein, I mentioned him earlier, those who don't know, legendary chief executive of Manchester City Council. Just over a decade ago, he persuaded George Osborne to create something called the Housing Investment Loans Fund, which was a £300 million fund to begin with, which was basically there to finance housing schemes that the lenders wouldn't touch. And Howard was saying to George, these are viable schemes. And the reason they couldn't proceed was, dare I say it, often London-based finance just had a downer on Manchester. Saw it as too risky, wouldn't do it, not on Manchester. So Howard said, well, we have to break that, because if we don't build the homes and the numbers we need and the grade A office and all the rest of it, we're just going to struggle to break out of where we are. We can't break the glass ceiling on a city like ours. So the change in our skyline has largely been driven by the Housing Investment Loans Fund. And that £300 million fund has been recycled 3 times. And there's not been one default on a loan. And they're commercial loans. People misunderstand it, they think it's a subsidy. It isn't. It's just simply a market failure because they wouldn't lend.
So there's a long interview. Not that long, about 25 minutes. Definitely worth going to watch. And then also, it's accompanied by a keynote speech that he gave on that same stage at the same event immediately after that. So I put links in the show notes. You should go and have a look at it. Key things that he's talking about is centralisation of control. And earlier on in that interview, he talks about centralisation of control of buses, housing and energy systems in particular. And the housing transformation of Manchester through the transformation of the skyline that we just talked about a moment was driven by this thing. It's what he talks about, the Greater Manchester Housing Investment Loans Fund. And I've had a little scan through this document on the left-hand side there, which is an evaluation of the Greater Manchester Housing Investment Loans Fund, which was prepared by an external consulting business for the Greater Manchester Combined Authority from the start of last year to look at the performance of the fund, how it did over the 10 years of its operation, right? So you can see on the right-hand side, I've just distilled some key numbers out of the executive summary, that they made 983 million of loans. So he said they got a 300 million bung up the front from George Osborne, and that's been recycled 3 times. So they've loaned that money out 3 times. That's gone to a total of 70 schemes, and that's delivered just under 11,000 homes, so 10,974 homes at a cost of just under £90,000 per home. This is what's being built. And what that has delivered for the fund is 29 million in profit to the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, with a further projected 10 million. So that'll come to 39 million profit for the fund. And then just less than that, 38,300,000 going back into central government. So you've essentially got the state acting as a bank and doing commercial lending to private enterprise at commercial rates. So he says they're getting a rate of interest back on this.
So the private sector makes profit, and the local authority, Burnham's crowd, is also taking a skim off the top of it.
Someone inside the Greater Manchester Combined Authority is getting paid quite a lot of money to run a bank.
Right.
Because I'd imagine you have to go at pretty decent commercial rates to attract the talent required to do this, because they could just go and work at a bank somewhere else. Plenty of banks in Manchester. So where's this thing come from? Like, what is it? Is it the state? Is it a commercial bank?
Partnership, Ben. Maybe.
It's a partnership.
It's a partnership. But at the end of the day, the ordinary people have got to pay for those homes, and they're going to pay through the nose, and they're going to pay through the nose plus the profit to cover both the private sector and Burnham's empire.
Exactly. That's who really ultimately is benefiting from this, because those developments are not great, and the various consequences, implications of all of this, Brian's just touched on. You're nationalising risk and privatising profit, right? So you've loaned some money out to private investors who couldn't raise it elsewhere in the market, right? And he says, no, these are viable developments. Yeah, but the market says that they're not. And it's not just because they're going down on Manchester because they're from London and they're snobs and they don't like the North. That can't be the only reason that this stuff is happening. It might be that they're not viable. It might be that you've got broader problems in the area that are beyond housing, like mass deindustrialisation of the whole of the north of England over the past 50 years. That might be a starting point. Go and have a look at that. So this is market manipulation as well, in a sense, like I've just described. And also it's destroying the fabric of the city because they're bulldozing through existing infrastructure to put up these high-rise buildings. And really importantly, particularly for someone of the political persuasion of Andy Burnham, normal people can't buy these houses. Yeah? So actually there's a report here from the Manchester Evening News from Stockport, and actually in that interview he goes on immediately after that clip to talk about Stockport, where locals are saying, well, these flats are £1,400 a month. locals can't afford to pay this. And this is actually coming from inside the Labour Party as well. So this is Christine Carrigan, who's just been voted in as the head of Labour in Stockport Council. And she's saying that what we're proposing here with these flats is they're going to be $1,400 a month, give or take, which is London prices, really. I mean, this is not Manchester prices, or certainly not Stockport prices. And what we're saying is we're building flats on that side of the viaduct that are going to cost more than the average person in Stockport can really afford. Yeah. Which is a very, very valid thing to say. So if Manchesterism, by the sounds of it, is using taxpayer money to create opportunities for private investors to make a lot of profit, and also to do that with the full blessing of the state, because once the state has gone in with a loan or even a capital investment, essentially they've put their stamp on it, said nothing's going to get in the way of this happening because we've got a vested interest in this thing working, right? Otherwise, we're going to lose that money. Right, so it's creating an artificial marketplace with taxpayer money for private investors to make huge sums from building homes that local people can't afford. Yeah, and this is presented to us by Burnham and his team as some kind of economic miracle.
And there's something else that goes with it, and that is that if you say Manchester, most people think of the city of Manchester. Yeah. But of course, what Burnham's also doing is expanding this into a city-state, a super state.
Yes.
So this whole scheme gets bigger because the geographic area is expanding with it.
Yeah.
So this is a fiefdom, which is all about making profit. Meanwhile, the ordinary people he is supposed to be looking after as a Labour policy man, they're actually being screwed into the ground.
Indeed, they are, and this isn't just in Manchester. This is national. So, just an example from you can't quite see the Civic Centre in the shot over our shoulders in the view of the Sound, but it's not far from there. But the Civic Centre is this 1960s monstrosity in the centre of Plymouth, which unfortunately is Grade 1 listed, because actually it'd be quite a good idea to just bulldoze it and put something else in its place.
Many people thought so, Ben, but of course it was suddenly listed and people had no idea that was really happening.
Yeah.
It's an interesting story in itself.
Exactly. So very recently, so back in May this year, a Manchester-based development company called Capital and Centric announced a partnership with Plymouth Council, where the council are going to put in, I think it was £17 million. The developer's going to put in some money, and they're going to turn it into flats that are rental only. Yeah, this is a public asset paid for out of taxpayer money that is now owned by a private investor, and you can't even buy a flat there. It's just going to be rental only. And then this is presented on the front page of the Plymouth Herald by one of the local MPs.
It's a wonderful scheme.
Yeah, this is amazing. We've never had this before. Isn't it great? This is going to come through now. Really, really not a good direction to travel. Just with an eye on time, I will just wrap up with a couple of final points. I definitely recommend going to watch this, and I'll put a link to it. It's probably been at least in part superseded by statements made today and in other things Andy Burnham has been up to. But the ones, the statements that really jumped out at me were the fact that he said, turn your back on net zero, you turn your back on the future. So it's total, absolute devotion to the net zero agenda. He also used the phrase that state ownership gives control over the pace of change, which is what any dictator would say. Yeah, and
that's what this is about. Be under no illusions. This is about creating a dictatorship through these city-state fiefdoms.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then the final thing that jumped out was he said that devolution is the only thing that has any political consensus in Westminster right now, which is ironic because when it was put to the country back in, I think it was 2005, we rejected devolution by 78 to 22% when the North East region was asked about this. So Westminster might be united behind devolution, but the country, having already rejected it, is being forced into it. Yeah. And I think when people really look into it and understand what's driving this, then they'll be extremely concerned, and they're absolutely right to be so. And then just as a final point, because this was something else that came out of that interview, Andy Burnham, Manchesterist, mentions that he's the two people who've had the most profound impact on Manchester over the past 40 years were Sir Howard Bernstein, the CEO of Manchester Council, who's essentially developed this whole model, right? This public-private model, which is now being exported to the rest of the country. And he also mentions Tony Wilson, the founder of Factory Records, who died back in 2007. And I actually talked about Factory Records just over 2 years ago now, because they were running this thing called The Fate of Britain. If you go to the Factory Records, Factory International website, they're talking about citizens' assemblies, participatory governance, all of the UN and New World Order agendas.
Yeah. And you've consistently followed this through, Ben. So traditional politics, it's still there. That's the theatre. But it's these agencies and the corporations that are actually driving politics on the ground. And Andy Burnham is going to spearhead this.
Certainly looks that way.
Okay. Thank you for that, Ben. Well, let's just move on a little bit. I've entitled this Chaos and Confusion Reframing the Nation. What am I really talking about? We'll just have a look at some of the headlines. We've got The Independent here. Britain must rejoin the single market within 5 years, says Major. So no sign, no opportunity for the public in UK to actually settle down, get on with life, enjoy life. We're going to get them riled up again with a whole load of rubbish over the European Union. And of course, John Major, failed Prime Minister, is going to lead the charge on that. We've got our freedoms are at great risk. So the other side of the coin coming in, if we get near the EU again, we're in trouble, which indeed we are. And then The Guardian here, we just chose this one, but of course we're seeing more and more coming up about the dangers of climate change. But let's just have a little look at the BBC. This is a masterpiece of pro-government propaganda on the EU. But let's just have a look at Ross Atkins from the BBC talking about the European Union. Pay attention to the very start of this video clip.
The UK hasn't got as much money as it would like, and there are lots of reasons for this. The war in Ukraine, COVID, the US war with Iran being three. Those are events outside the UK's control, but there's something else, which we chose to do, that most economists think is holding our economy back. One estimate is of a long-term hit of 4%. Another says it's already been 6 to 8%, a difference of up to £240 billion a year to the size of the economy. I'm talking about this.
We're out.
It's 10 years since the UK chose Brexit. It was one of the most consequential moments for the country since the Second World War. If you're under 28, you're too young to have voted, but you're living with the consequences of that decision. 52% voted to leave the European Union, despite the leaders of the main parties being against it, despite advice from the US, despite repeated warnings about the economy. I reported on the campaign and the vote and everything that's followed. 10 years on, I want to return to the question of Brexit and the economy, because many analysts say those warnings were right.
Well, there we are, pure propaganda, because, of course, what that gentleman is doing is saying he was right. Well, he wasn't, he was wrong. And the reason the country isn't performing is because the country isn't allowed to perform as a nation state. There's always constant political agenda to destroy the ability of this country to produce, manufacture and trade at international levels. So the big sounding post at the moment, sounding board at the moment is we desperately need to get back into the European Union. We certainly don't. But did you pick up on the very beginning, Ben? These wars in Ukraine and Iran and, well...
And COVID.
COVID, yeah, but just stick on the wars. Nobody knows how they started. Britain wasn't involved in helping to kickstart the war in Ukraine. They were just all accidental things. So he skips over those straight into the propaganda. I just had to show that clip because it's the BBC at its best or its worst. And of course, where the BBC would take us is absolutely back into the political control of the EU collective state, a very, very dangerous place to be. And UK Column has warned over a great number of years how dangerous the European Union project is. So please don't be fooled. Now, let's move on to some good news. Many new people have joined the UK column. So if you're a recent new member of UK column, thank you very much. It's great to have you on board. And it's been really interesting to hear people picking up on the different themes that the UK column is covering. Now, if you decide to take a membership, you've got options to choose from. You can take a donation, you can take a monthly membership, annual or a lifetime membership, which many people do. And of course, you can also purchase through our shop. So not only have we got edition 1 of the column out, we have also got the column issue 2 ready to go. Some fantastic articles, many different viewpoints. And again, we've had a lot of very positive feedback back from everybody who's been involved with these 2 editions of the UK column. So if you haven't purchased one, get onto the UK column shop. Also want to give people a reminder of our 20th anniversary event, 18th to 20th of September in Plymouth. It's really wonderful, the feedback we're getting from people who are signed up, because it's clear that you're getting excited about what's coming. I have to give everyone who's bought a ticket a reminder that you should have had an email asking for your food choices. And if you haven't had that email, do have a look in your spam folder, check that it hasn't got lost in your system. But Gemma needs replies, because it's absolutely vital we get your choices for eats in the calendar, as it were. So over to you, check your emails and make sure that you've selected food. Food is going to be absolutely superb. The hotel has been very, very enthusiastic about having the UK column there. And we know that we're going to have a really fantastic event. If you're not already signed up, again, get onto the UK column website, have a look for 20th anniversary UK column on location, and purchase your ticket there. The aim is to be together for the whole weekend. Now then, excuse me, tonight at 7 p.m, we've got germ warfare. We need empathy in the information war, a very, very pertinent title, because a lot of people getting very anxious, fretful, some even a little bit vexatious, maybe a bit aggressive. People are definitely getting unsettled, seeing breakdown come into being. And it's vital that everybody that's fighting this system stays friends in order that we can work with other people. Silk and Steel going out tonight at 9 p.m, Chinese history series. Qin Empire strikes back again. Klubang's rise and Liang's fall. So that's different material for you. And also tomorrow at 1 p.m, my interview with Robin Tilbrook from the English Democrats going out. This is a very, very enjoyable and informative discussion. Robin Tilbrook putting a lot of very good points out about our system of law and the Constitution, and why it's vital everybody in the country understands and protects the English Constitution that's protecting us. So it doesn't matter where you're from or what colour you are or what religion you are. At the moment, one of the things between you and the dictatorships of the sort that Ben's been describing is common law and the Constitution. So do tune in for that. Ben, that brings us back to the, how do we say, Sadiq Khan.
Yes. The climate crisis. It's escalating, apparently. And that means an opportunity for Sadiq Khan to parade around London like he's doing something useful. Let's have a little look at what he got up to last week.
This week in London, we have young people, we have grassroots campaigners, we have artists, we have activists, we have the United Nations, we have the royal family, we have national politicians, we have regional politicians, we have C40, we have ordinary citizens, and I could go on, coming together with one goal, and that is to make sure that we are the solution to the challenges we face across the globe. National leaders are not facing up to the risks of this man-made crisis. This week in London, we'll be hosting over 1,300 event attended by more than 100,000 people. This is the biggest climate festival in the world.
Does he actually believe this nonsense?
I don't think he does, no. I don't think he does. He actually said that the most honest thing he's probably ever said is that this is a man-made crisis, but not in the sense that anthropogenic climate change is real, as in like, no, you just made it all up, haven't you, Sadiq Khan?
Yeah.
But that kind of gives you a sense of what they get up to. These things, huge international program, very heavy focus on the younger generation. You saw Khan there with his selfies being taken. This is the kind of currency of modern politics, having selfies taken with young people and basically filling them with some appalling propaganda. And actually, one of the things that I've been seeing recently is this idea that the fossil fuels industry is fascist and Zionist. Therefore, if you fight against the fossil fuels industry, then that means you're fighting against Zionism, right? So they've kind of elided those two things together, while ignoring who's actually behind the climate change movement. This picture we can just bring on screen now is one of the most telling that I saw from the whole week of events. This was from Khan's own Facebook feed, I think, actually. He was showing on his Facebook. And, it's really interesting here. The people in the foreground are the ones that you hear from a lot. So Sadiq Khan there. But then who's next to him? Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the UN, who was also the head of the Socialist International, which is like one of the main global progressive political parties that is actually set up for the specific purposes of establishing a one world government. That's what they said they were doing when it was established in the 1950s.
It's all hidden in plain sight.
Yeah, it's absolutely hidden in plain sight. But the most important person in that picture is the little chappie on the far left, who we can just see there. Not politically far left, but just far left in the picture. That is, of course, Michael Bloomberg, the man who is funding this whole thing. And actually, this is really what it's all about, right? So we took to the Financial Times to talk about his new fund, $285 million to fight against the oil interests, apparently. So this is Mr. Bloomberg putting huge amounts of money into the climate movement to fight back against those horrible fossil fuel interests. But what the vast majority of particularly young people going along with this, particularly pro-Palestine young people, of which there are many going along with this, they don't seem to understand, is that Michael Bloomberg is an uber Zionist. So if you're backing the climate change agenda, then that is a Zionist agenda, because all the main people making the money and leading out most of the communications around it, whether it's members of the royal family or multinational billionaires like Bloomberg and people of his ilk, they're all Zionists. And this is what they want, right? So, pay attention, young people. And what we're also beginning to see now, thanks for Gemma for sending this over earlier on, is this idea that whole swathes of the country are going to be swallowed by the sea by 2050. But actually, they were telling us this in 1980, 1990, certainly the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And no one's been swallowed by the sea yet.
Same old propaganda, and it's all about anxiety and fear, because if people are concentrating on this, they're not watching what's being done in the political arena.
Exactly. And who benefits? Cui bono, as they say. Well, in this instance, it's Bloomberg and capital, money, the power structure. They're the ones who are promoting this, and they're the ones who are going to draw all the benefit from it.
Okay.
Tout ça change.
Indeed.
Right. What are we looking at now? Oh, we're going to talk about James Pennell. And I'm going to open up with this little quote from Saul Alinsky, which I love, and it's very apt when you look at how the system operates, which is that power goes to two poles, to those who've got the money and to those who've got the people. And I'm going to use this to talk about James Pennell, who was mentioned on the news at the end of last week. So he's just come back into politics as Andy Burnham's chief of staff. So the main guy who's going to be running his operation behind the scenes. Pennell himself, a long-time Labour Party member and operative, including spending time as an MP. Was instrumental in helping to set up Ofcom in the latter years of the Blair's second term. And what was noted last week is that he's actually coming into this position with Andy Burnham, having just been the chief executive of an organisation called Flint Global, which is a advisory firm which offers very, very expensive advice to international corporations, political bodies, NGOs, people operating in the global system. And it was co-founded, as I spoke about towards the end of last year, by these two people. So that's Sir Simon Fraser, who, amongst many other things, is the chair of Chatham House, Royal Institute of International Affairs. And his co-founder was this guy, this is Ed Richards, who is the chair of Nesta and the Behavioural Insights team. And the way I frame those two things are people and money. So the Alinsky quote was, power goes to two poles. Who's got the people? Who's got the money? Ed Richards has got the people. So this is Nesta. This is Behavioural Insights team. This is the mind space.
Reframing and controlling the minds of the public.
Yes.
So that they adhere to the government's policies.
Exactly. Yeah. As seen through COVID, certainly, but all of the climate communication that's coming out at the moment. And in fact, the Behavioural Insights team has become internationally influential. I counted on here 67 countries that they're now operating in, 83 departments across UK government, almost the same amount in the US government, by the way, which I thought was quite interesting. You know, the nature of that special relationship.
And of course, there was the relationship with Sunstein in America in the very early days.
Yes. So
the Behavioural Insights team were developing this policy absolutely in partnership with the Americans, and then later we saw the French joining in.
Yeah, absolutely. So Behavioural Insights team, very influential. Ed Richards sits on top of that. So he's kind of on the people side of things. And also Nesta, before I forget, which owns the Behavioural Insights team now, extremely active in pushing progressive policy, leading the conversation around progressive policy. This plan for Britain came from Ravi Guru Murthy, the chief executive of Nesta, and Ed Richards is his boss. And there are just a few points that jumped out at this from the article, quite a long article, but he's really pushing this idea of market socialism. This is exactly what we were just describing earlier. It's what Manchesterism is what the third way is, all the same stuff. He also then goes on to talk about the idea that the next decade will require both higher taxes and harder choices. So, you know, that sounds fun, doesn't it? Fantastic, Mr. Guru Murphy. And then if Manchester fails to build because of local opposition, London should force it to do so. So
time and time again, Ben, we are seeing in the comments these people make or their documentation how they just regard the state as being an enforcer of policy. You are not going to challenge, as far as they're concerned, you're not going to challenge government and its policies. It's going to steamroller over you. Remember, Julia Middleton, the former chief executive of Common Purpose, in her book talked about steamrolling over opposition, pushing them aside, running over them. And this is the same thing. So this is a brutal form of government that is growing under the cover of sort of humanistic socialism.
Absolutely, it is. It's a dictatorship. You know, I think that we can very reasonably use that terminology. So that's the kind of left side of this diagram that I was just talking about, the people bit, which is what Ed Richards represents and is feeding into James Purnell, and what he's going to take into Downing Street with him. But crucially, and probably less predictably, given that Purnell is from a progressive liberal background within the Labour Party, is the relationship with Simon Fraser there on the right-hand side of the diagram, the money side of the diagram. So Fraser was, amongst other things, one of our top diplomats. He ran the embassy network. He's now the chair of Chatham House, as well as maintaining a role with Flint Global. And actually, I think it's really useful for us to remind ourselves where Chatham House actually came from and the role of Lord Alfred Milner in the Boer War.
The key figure in this next phase was Alfred Milner. Milner was appointed High Commissioner for South Africa in 1897, and from the moment he arrived, his agenda was clear. He believed that British supremacy in southern Africa was non-negotiable, and he was willing to engineer a war to achieve it. Milner was brilliant, cold, and utterly convinced of his own righteousness. He had been educated at Oxford, had served in Egypt, and possessed the kind of imperial confidence that brooked no compromise. Milner quickly assessed the situation and concluded that the Transvaal would never voluntarily submit to British control. Kruger had been re-elected in 1898 with an overwhelming mandate, and the discovery of gold had given his republic the financial resources to resist British pressure. Milner told the colonial secretary, Joseph Chamberlain, that a crisis would have to be engineered. Those were essentially his words. He would use the Whitelander grievances as the pretext, but the real objective was always the same: to bring the Transvaal and its gold under British sovereignty.
So that was a clip from a film about the Boer War and the British involvement in South Africa with gold mining and diamond mining, Cecil Rhodes, and importantly, Lord Milner, as referenced in that clip, who then, through the Boer War, went on to be responsible for the deaths of over 22,000 British troops, invented the concentration camp.
Yeah, I wondered whether...
in which over 40,000 Boer women and children mainly died. He then went on to actually write the Balfour Declaration and then founded Chatham House. So those are the people who are obsessed with British supremacy, who will do anything to achieve it and to maintain it, establishing institutions like Chatham House, which is where Simon Fraser is currently the chair. He sits on top of Flint Global, and that's also what's being taken into number 10 with James Purnell as Andy Burnham's chief of staff. Now, just a very quick one to wrap this section up. I talked about Simon Fraser being involved with Chatham House. He's also on the board of the Ditchley Foundation, and I came across this photo on the Ditchley website. Who do you recognise here, Brian? I'll just speed it up.
It's a spooky face.
It's a spooky face. That's Blaise Mechevelli, the head of MI6. Who's she there with on this lovely away day out in the Oxfordshire countryside? So that is Louis Mosley from Palantir.
Just a coincidence.
Isn't that? I wonder if they knew each other or if this was a complete accident. And then that's Matt Clifford, who's the guy that was the AI Sherpa to the AI Summit. So one of the most powerful people in the civil service, or certainly circulating around the civil service. And then finally, that guy, Mark Warner, was the founder of something called Faculty, which was bought by Accenture, which is Anderson Consulting, rebranded. And he's now their global CTO. So just on that one image, you've got three of the most powerful people in the UK in artificial intelligence together, and the head of MI6 on a lovely away day at the Ditchley Foundation, which is basically Chatham House away day venue in the country, is the way I understand it.
With no minutes, no public accountability.
No, certainly not. Certainly not. Yeah. So anyway, that's what's going into Downing Street.
Ben, thank you very much for that. So this is a deep look into real politics in the power operating UK. We're going to come back a little bit now and just have a look at some of the more political reactions to things unfolding in UK. So this is also warning about the change of politics in this country, but we're coming in from a slightly different direction. Now, of course, immigration, migration, very, very hot topic. BBC here is getting very excited because it says UK migration has dropped to 171,000, almost half 2024's figure. But I mean, is that really sustainable in any shape or form? Can a country have any peace if continually we've got a vast number of people coming into the country? So while the reality is approved, facilitated migration, of course, a lot of people talking about illegal immigration, a very, very tiny percentage of the overall immigration figures. Now, the topic is getting more interesting because obviously Andy Burnham is very keen that the migration continues. And you saw that headline earlier on where the government is trying to rethink things. So Here we've got Home Secretary Mahmood seeks Canada-style asylum sponsorship route into UK. There was more being talked about this over the weekend. But this is the means by which migration is facilitated by governments who then pretend that they have no idea how so many people come into the country. So this is duplicitous politics, but if you know where to look, you can see what's happening. Now let's jump across to Wales as an interesting country, and let's have a look at the politics and what's being said in Wales around a number of issues. We're going to kick off with the leader talking about two futures.
On May the 7th, you'll have a choice to make about the Wales you want and the kind of future you want to see. This campaign has been a journey, and it's been an honour to meet so many of you, hearing about your hopes and your ambitions and what matters to you. You've been telling me that you just want things to work better, to want to wake up and not have to worry about what comes next, the light at the end of the tunnel. And you've told me that you care about your community and your country.
For decades, Wales has been shortchanged by Westminster governments that don't listen.
So lots of spin in there. The happy music, of course, people, they just want to get on with their lives. They want to wake up one day and get on and work and enjoy their families and enjoy a stable country. Well, that's not coming. And Rhun ap Iwerwyth, the leader of Plaid Cymru, if I pronounce that correctly, of course, is giving this very glossy image. But what's the problem? Well, it's that nasty Westminster government which has been depriving Wales of its proper heritage. So that's the spin from the top of the party, but what's really coming inside? Well, let's have a listen to Williams here from the Senate talking about some issues.
The plan rightly places a firm focus on the criminal justice system as an area in which there is racial injustice as regards its treatment of and outcomes for people from ethnic minorities. The plan states it is only when we have full oversight of the justice system in Wales that we will be able to fully align its delivery with the needs and priorities of minority ethnic communities of Wales, and that devolution of the police and justice system is the most sustainable way of creating a justice system that is anti-racist and fully meets the diverse needs of the people in Wales.
Well, there's some nuances there. A justice system that's anti-racist, that means it's pro something. What do you think, Ben?
It's a battering ram for communism.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right?
The state must step in and protect these poor marginalised communities, and the only reason these poor marginalised communities are here is because we brought them here.
Indeed. And we're going to change the system to have positive discrimination to get a positive outcome. So if you think you're Welsh and you're going to be waking up one morning to that relaxed future, the sunshine, as the leader said, no, you are going to be further down the food chain as other people's interests are promoted over and above yours, and both the police and the courts are going to enforce that. Let's hear a little bit more from the same lady.
We've already seen some of the national institutions be challenged on their work on decolonisation, facing vile abuse online and being questioned by those that don't agree with Wales's direction here. We also need to be very clear that we are taking a different direction to England. I'm pleased to see in the action plan in relation to culture, heritage and sport a commitment to ensuring that more applications are made by Black, Asian and minority ethnic people, but crucially more appointments too, as employees and also as board members. We're also aware, of course, that no one non-white applied for the role of Chair of Sports Wales. There is work for us to do in this area. And elsewhere in the plan, there are specific actions in relation to public appointment.
So more positive discrimination from that particular lady. I'll check on the news, check on the names, and make a correction there in the show notes afterwards. But essentially, you can see what is really coming through. This is not a society where everybody is equal. This is a society which is pushing these central government agendas as to what sort of society you will be allowed to live in. And at the moment, it doesn't matter whether you're Scottish or English or Welsh or from Northern Ireland, your position at the moment is at the middle of the food chain, and you're shortly to be pushed to the bottom as these positive discriminatory agendas come in. I've got one more comment in this video for you.
Now, to conflate the issue of immigration with the nation of sanctuary, and then, of course, some of the vile stuff that we've just been hearing is actually really shocking. I think is disturbing. Now, given that immigration and security checks are actually governed by robust UK-wide systems, and of course the Wales Nation of Sanctuary is about integration and support, does the First Minister then agree that suggesting this link between sanctuary and risk to public safety is not supported by evidence and actually risks unnecessarily stoking up fear amongst our communities and amongst the public of Wales?
I certainly associate myself with those comments and agree with them.
So I'll just make clear that the inset image there was by the person who'd uploaded that video to the internet. But of course, this emphasises the deep concern that people have. But I think it's very, very clear that as Wales pushes for ever more devolution from that nasty Westminster, that it isn't going to bring a society which is for the Welsh. This is going to bring the new society along the lines that have been implemented by the central government control. So it's, to me, pretty astonishing, this.
Those clips are extraordinary.
Yeah.
Like the total denial of the obvious truth of things, like saying, how can you associate a sanctuary city with immigration? Well, that's what it is. What are you talking about?
Well, let's ease that one along, Ben. We'll put it on screen. Here's the website, Wales, a Nation of Sanctuary. Wales is aiming to become the world's first nation of sanctuary. Nation of Sanctuary is a sub-movement of City of Sanctuary UK. The vision is of a Wales in which wherever people seeking sanctuary go, they are met with welcome, understanding, and celebration of their unique contribution to the rich tapestry of Welsh life. So never mind generations of Welsh people that have been living in Wales and creating that rich tapestry of life. We have a new agenda of people who are going to receive priority, including in policing and at law. So I'll just pop a little bit more on screen. This is actually the City of Sanctuary UK website itself. And there you can see all of the cities that have signed up for this. So every city that's signed up for this agenda is absolutely saying that newcomers of whatever origin are going to be placed above local people. This is pretty incredible. So how can we contrast what's actually happening on the ground in Wales with what's happening in local politics? Well, let's take the same issue and bring Mr. Lowe on screen. And I've got 3 clips here where he's talking about migration, immigration. Let's hear what Lowe has to say.
I'm going to read a short passage from your foreword to the report, which I think is, can sort of preside over this conversation we're about to have about Manchester, which is obviously one of the hotspots where this kind of thing has been going on. You spoke about the cause of this, and I think you addressed this very well in this introduction. You say the root cause was immigration, beginning with the British Nationality Act in 1948 and escalating under Tony Blair from 1997 onwards. Believing proud nations to be responsible for the mid-20th century destruction of Europe, our post-war leaders embraced diversity and multiculturalism as the supposedly civilized alternative. This report establishes beyond any doubt that this open society obsession has in fact enabled untold barbarism of its own. Oil and water do not mix, and cultural differences going back centuries are the genesis of this problem.
Well, I've made it very clear, and I've made it very clear on various interviews and podcasts that I've done, that multiculturalism was the way in which I think post-war Europe decided it was going to undermine the nation state and undermine the cohesion that created the high trust societies that we have developed over many thousands of years, and they don't develop overnight. So I think it's meant that it's brought in people who don't understand how we operate. And I've said in the past, Lee Kuan Yew came to London after the war, and he modelled Singapore, which, by the way, is an incredibly successful society now, on post-war England, where you had total trust. You had people with honesty boxes for newspapers in London. And the whole thing was a nation state at peace with itself. But in order to undermine our nation state, they had to create this multicultural society. So I think multiculturalism, as Enoch Powell said in 69, is undesirable, and it has palpably failed.
Yes.
But in dealing with the issue, I think what we've always said, and it's in our mass deportations document, we've actually produced a document so people can read what our plan is to try and restore the British Constitution and Britain for the tax-paying, honourable, decent, law-abiding British people.
So I'm sure there'll be some restored people listening in who will take a little bit of issue with what I'm going to say, but it's what Lowe does not say that's key. So one of the statements he makes is that post-war Europe decided. No, it's individuals, it's people that make decisions. So who, Mr. Lowe, made the decisions which caused the problem? He doesn't deal with that question. That's just left to one side. And then he talks about the undermining of our nation state. He doesn't qualify who they are. But what you've been doing consistently, Ben, over months now, well, in fact, over a year, is to actually drill into the people who are making the policies which are destroying the country. But a great weakness here of Restore, Mr. Lowe in particular, is he is not addressing who the people are and who the organisations are which are bringing in the policies which are destroying the country. And if we're going to correct the problem, we need to know who's causing the problem. And to his credit, Mr. Lowe does admit that it's not the fault of the people coming into the country, it is the fault of the people that created the policies. Let's just follow on. This is the next segment from the same clip.
And that starts, as we know, with detaining and deporting people arriving illegally, then finding and deporting people living here illegally, then deporting the 10,500 foreign criminals in our prisons, and then we turn our attention, in the same way that Sweden and Denmark have, to sorting out people who are living here on benefits, who've never contributed to Britain.
Yep.
And we do it by basically dealing with the welfarism. So we reduce welfarism, we create a hostile environment, and we encourage people to go home naturally. And at the same time, if necessary, we incentivize them to leave. But what we can't do is be unfair or illegal towards people who, through no fault of their own, have been encouraged in a thoroughly underhand, devious and misguided way to come and settle here. And if they're contributing to our economy, as I've said in the past, and they are making a sort of valuable payment of taxes and a contribution, and they accept our laws and they've integrated into our society, there are people who don't think that is desirable, but nevertheless, they've come here in good faith, and we cannot treat them in a way which is not either legal or fair.
So just like the grooming gangs, what Mr. Lowe is doing here is focusing on the small percentage of the illegal migrants. What he's not doing is concentrating on the overall numbers and who created what he states are devious, underhand policies that made these things happen. neither is he focusing on who is making these policies. So we can get rid of all these illegal migrants in the country, but we're still then left with the problem that we've got people inside the country that are creating the problem politically in the first place, and these are never identified. So this is a very emotive delivery by Lowe, but it's not actually taking us to a solution because he doesn't identify who's causing the problem. Now, I just bring up on screen Substack. Well, this is X, but it's Frank Wright's Substack. The status of peak victim is contested at your expense. This is a really good article where he's talking about essentially how a variety of topics are being used to play a game with people's minds, the divide and rule, as you speak about, Ben, and encourage people to have a read of that article, because we have to understand the mind games being used before we can get to the solutions. And if I move on one, the trans agenda is also a part of this grievance industry. Look at the headline from the Telegraph here: parents risk jail if they try to talk children out of trans treatment. So this is very, very dangerous stuff. But also it's encouraging to know that people are picking up on it. This lady, Helen Webberley, being broadcast on many of the bigger media channels, she is absolutely for the trans agenda and changing, supposedly changing children's gender. But really, what is the agenda? Well, it's an eyes wide shut agenda. Ben, over to you.
It might have something to do with what we're going to talk about now, actually, when you think about agendas, because the king has changed his job definition incredibly. So, I mean, it's probably not that incredible, is it? We've had this idea of defender of faith as opposed to defender of the faith been circulating for probably the best part of 20 years now, to be honest with you. But it's now officially happened. The king's official job is to protect faith within the multi-faith nation. That's what we are now, is a multi-faith nation. It's a newly published definition. It's come from the palace, and this is quite a big deal. So it changes the description of the king's role of head of the nation when he was the head of the Church of England and defender of the faith, which is what was actually in his coronation oath.
Indeed, yeah.
So he took the oath, and then 2 years later, he's just said, well, actually, that bit I didn't really like that much, so I'm going to change it retrospectively. Can you do that?
Well, he can do anything. And, surprisingly, one moment he's a Christian, then he's hinting that he's Jewish, or there's Jewish connections. And now we've moved on to other. He can be anything. He's all things to all man. So he certainly can't be a Christian. He's something very different.
He certainly is, yes. So, but this is, I see this as a direct attack on Christianity. It comes hot on the heels of the Bill C-9 in Canada, which was the Combating Hate Act, which is the Liberal government's response to a rise in so-called hatred. Hundreds of thousands of Canadians have written to Parliament to oppose the bill, but last week it received royal assent. So the King has given his assent to this at exactly the same time as he's come through and said that he's now the defender of faith. The Canadian Constitution Foundation had these words to say: Bill C-9 has removed the good faith religious expression defence from convictions for criminal hate speech. It is illegal under Section 3191 of the Criminal Code to publicly incite hatred by communicating statements in any public place that incites hatred against any identifiable group where such incitement is likely to lead to a breach of the peace. Then goes on to say it is also illegal under Section 3192 of the Criminal Code to communicate statements other than in private conversation that willfully promotes hatred against any identifiable group, and under another provision to willfully promote anti-Semitism by communicating statements other than in private conversation condoning, denying or downplaying the Holocaust, which probably tells us a little bit about what's actually going on here.
I'm sure it does, but of course, the way this legislation is written, it's always with enough flexibility that the politically imposed judge adjudicating in your case will make his decision on your guilt or otherwise based on his interpretation of the words. So this is catch-all legislation to make sure you daren't speak out about anything which is causing you trouble.
Absolutely. And another blog that I read that was sent to me says that Canada has banned history and the Bible. That's the way that's being interpreted. And I think we should also just remember that Charles was involved last year, about 18 months ago, January 25, in the Drumlanrig Accords, which I reported on back in October, which is the Muslim-Jewish Reconciliation Accords, a framework for coordination between the senior members of the Jewish and the Muslim community here in the UK to promote shared objectives at the expense, therefore, of everyone else. And actually, this sort of slow creeping push towards criminalisation of Christian doctrine is, I think, probably the most important thing going on right now in the country, and no one's talking about it.
Well, we are, Ben.
Well, we are.
Absolutely.
Certainly are, Brian.
We are. Extremely heavy news today. We knew this would be the case, but it's very important that adults in the United Kingdom in 2026 understand what's really happening. There is a dictatorship unfolding very, very quickly. In our opinion, Andy Burnham is part of that dictatorship, whether he realizes it or not. And how it's stopped is by people becoming active at local level. So we are going to make sure that in future news programs, we're also going to focus in on what people are doing and they can do to challenge this sort of policy at local level. Remember, if the rules-based international order cannot get its policies in position at ground level amongst individuals and families and local communities, it is not winning. So it's a high-level battle against very powerful people and forces, but the solution is to fight it at a very local level. So just wanted to add a bit of positive end to the news. But you've got an uplifting picture for us, particularly for those with a nautical bent, maybe.
Yes, there you go. The things you see walking around Plymouth on the weekend. So this was yesterday, the Santa Maria Manuela, which is a Portuguese sailing ship, which was really striking, just moored up there down by the Barbican. And to give you a real sense of what it looks like, because, this is quite a nice photo, that's what it actually looks like.
Yeah.
It's a stunning bit of kit.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And there's something about the sea which changes your whole view on the world, but we'll leave that for another time. Huge thank you to the audience who's joined us today, wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much for your support. Huge thank you to all the UK column members. A huge welcome to all those new people that have joined us. It's clear that the UK column message is making a difference. We must end now. If you are a member of UK Column, stay with us. We'll be back for UK Column Extra in a few minutes. Bye-bye.